we'll go ahead and start the effective communication presentation. So again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. As I have said before, effective communication is critical for you all working with your teams. This also helps you in group settings for your classes, and will also help you with your when you graduate and are working in teams in your professional life. We will teach you some tips and tricks tonight to help you with that. So let me get that called up. All right, so good quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. How many times have we said one thing and somebody else heard the other? But here's the problem. Maybe we don't realize the person heard something differently than what you said, right? So that can happen, that can cause conflict, that can cause issues, especially when we are working with different people. So this is not necessarily all about your major. What this is there are different people, and different people communicate differently. So at an extreme level, we have extroverts and introverts, right? Who would say that they're an extrovert? This is not on camera, so all right. Who would say that they're an introvert? Okay. All right, so extroverts and introverts, they communicate completely differently, right? And sometimes things can be lost in translation. So one of my favorite presentations is this one to give, because communication is so critical and so key to everything. So communication, if you don't know, of course, is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, symbols to basically have a communication between a sender and a receiver, right? Everyone processes communication completely differently, and that's not a bad thing. Different people are great, and different communication styles are great, and we can learn from one another how to communicate better. So we say embrace complementary differences. You're able to see things from different angles. So I am a self-professed extrovert. I've had a lot of introverts work for me, and over the course of the years, I have learned a lot from introverts so that I understand how to better communicate with people as a whole, right? Because different people want to hear things differently. So constructing better communications for different audiences is what we're all about tonight. This is going to critically help you as you navigate EagleWorks. So some examples of communication, of course, verbal. So we're having a conversation, but there's also nonverbal communication, and sometimes nonverbal communication can actually cause some problems, right? So if you think about it, like, if you're having a conversation with somebody and they're obviously disinterested, maybe they're communicating with you, right? They're talking with you, but you can tell on their face that they're not really wanting to talk to you or not wanting to be in the situation. That can make you feel kind of bad, right? And that can cause some issues of communication. Obviously, we have written communication, so it's incumbent upon you all to work on this business plan, the template that we're providing to you all. So you have to write and communicate to the judges why you are the team that should win, or why your product or service is viable. And then most importantly, listening, right? We have to listen, and we have to make sure that we're hearing what other people are saying. And like I've said a couple times already, just because you've said something doesn't mean that the other person understands it or heard it the way that you intended it. So it's really important to actively listen to people, right? So I, as an extrovert, I'll go on some stereotypes, but I'll say it as for me. As an extrovert, it can be difficult sometimes for me to completely concentrate and listen. I want to get the summary, I want to get the overview, whereas other people sometimes when they're talking to me or writing to me, maybe they've written me a really long email, I'm not going to pick up on all the nuances that they have put in there, right? So it's important for everybody to understand, particularly on your team, how your teammates are going to communicate with each other, okay? So we'll get into that a little bit more in depth here in a little bit, but just understand that actively listening is really one of the most important things that you can do. So how do you communicate? So the first step in effectively communicating is understanding how you, as a individual, how you communicate. And maybe we don't even understand how we actually communicate. I'm not talking about talking versus writing versus whatever it is. Understanding how you truly send a message out and are able to have the other person understand what you're talking about, okay? So everyone communicates differently, and there's no one right or wrong way. So everything we're going to talk about tonight, even if I make some generalizations, nothing is negative. That just means that we're different individual people, and that's a thing to be celebrated, right? And the more that we can learn about how other people communicate, we can then become better communicators ourselves. So, like I said, active listening is very important. And one way to do that is actually to put yourselves in somebody else's shoes. You've always heard the old adage, walk a mile in someone's shoes. You can learn a lot from that. So think about, as you go into, communicating with your team, think about how will your teammate perceive what you're saying. Maybe you're asking a question that's generally, or is is very truly non-conflict oriented in nature, but maybe the way that you ask it, if you ask it in a very dry manner, or if you ask it in a way that that may sound like you're criticizing them when you're actually not. Think about how they may perceive that, and as you learn about your teammates and how they communicate, you can learn to actually craft your messages, your nonverbal language, in a better way. And again, we're going to get into this more deep. So, will this information be helpful for the? Well, that shouldn't be in there. That was actually written for governor's school. But think about it as if you're communicating something, you're telling your teammates something. Think about, is this information actually helpful, or is this information that you're telling them, is this just to maybe cut them down or make them, maybe you're not happy with them and something you're saying, or your nonverbal messages are showing that you're kind of irritated with them. So think about how that's going to be perceived. Think about how you would feel if somebody communicated with you like that. So it understands a basic understanding of how your receiver communicates, or of course your teammate. So activity one. So this is going to be a very interactive lesson today. So activity one. So I want all of you all to get up and go to the back of the room. All right. So just kind of gather in the back of the room there. And what you're going to do is you all are going to line up in order of your birthdays. Okay. But here's the thing. You all cannot talk to each other. You all have to figure out what your all's birthday is and line up from January to December. And line up chronologically according to year. Congratulations. All right, so we can sit back down. So think about this. All right, so I really enjoy watching how people do this. I've been doing this for probably about 5, 6, 7 years. So how did you all do this? You did it completely through nonverbal communication. A lot of you all were signing out. What are some of the things that you all perceived? Why was it hard? One, I would say that it's probably hard because maybe I didn't give clear directions, right? Or maybe directions that could have been better. What are some of the issues also that you all encountered through that?
Nobody was making a move.
Nobody's what?
Making a move, everybody was standing around signing.
Okay.
And also trying to figure out which system people were using, whether they were saying, the month as the day,
Right.
or whether they're just saying the month.
Yep.
And then,
They're saying, right?
yeah, and then someone held up all 10 figures for the year. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be what?
Month. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was no standardized form of communication that we could go on, right? Everybody was using their own individual idea of what they wanted to communicate, but everybody's got their different ideas, right? So we do this as a fun example, but also two, to illustrate, again, to drive home the point that all of us are communicating differently and we have our own ideas of how to communicate. So with that said, we're not going to do this specific activity, but what I want to encourage you all to do, we'll put this on the website in the morning, and actually if you want to go ahead and just put that into your phones and do this later, this is called the 4 temperaments. So I'm sure a lot of you all have done y'all done the Myers-Briggs, right? And so how many of y'all done Myers-Briggs or something similar? Okay, so what do you get? You get out like an ENTJ, IXQRP, all that's kind of difficult to understand, right? And it's a really, really long test. It costs some money to take it. So what we do is we do a simplified version of it, and it's called the 4 temperaments. And what I want to encourage you all to do is to take this with your all. So first, take it for yourself. But then also anybody that wasn't here, anybody that's on your team, have them take it as well. Because what this will do is it categorizes your temperament or your communication styles into 4 different categories, right? Now, these are not end-all be-all categories, but these will help you, and it's actually pretty amazing what you can learn about this. This will help you understand how you communicate and how your team members communicate. And therefore, once you know how each other are communicating, you will much more effectively communicate with each other. So take that. We just don't have time tonight, so I want to get you all out of here. But take that tonight. I think you'll find it really interesting. So was everybody able to get the link? We'll put it on the website too. But and I know it's kind of there's kind of some glare here, but it's bit.ly/4temp test, and the T's are capitalized. So you can take a picture or type it in. So bit.ly/4TEMPTEST. All right. So I think it's about 40 questions. It goes pretty quickly. But anyhow, we do this to help us understand what are our strengths and weaknesses in communicating. So it allows us to understand a direction for combating our natural weaknesses, because not all of us are perfect. It allows us to live in our own strengths. It aids us in acquiring strengths outside of our natural temperament. And it also helps us to relate better. So if I understand, this will make more sense in a minute, but if I understand that I'm a sanguine and that the other person is like a melancholic, those are complete opposites and they communicate in completely different ways. If I can understand that I'm interacting with that particular person and I know my strengths, but I also know my weaknesses, and I understand better how to communicate with that other person, right? Especially when you're dealing with polar opposites, okay? So it also helps you to empathize. So empathy is very important. So you'll find out next week when we do our design challenge that empathy is the first step to designing great products and services, right? So you empathize with another person. The same exact thing is true when you're working with your team. If you can empathize with your teammate, you can understand, again, like I said, walk a mile in their shoe. You can understand better how to communicate with them. So these, last thing I'll say about it is these temperaments tend to flare up in moments of stress, and there will be stress, especially when EagleWorks is coming up and you're finalizing your pitches and your plans, and maybe you're a little stressed out, you've got a lot of other stuff going on. These temperaments tend to flare up and really show themselves during times of stress. So let's talk about what those temperaments are. And I guess I should also point out, it's not about pigeonholing. Just because you get one particular result doesn't mean that's the end all be all. It just happens to be that that's typically where your temperament falls. So they're also not to be meant to be used as excuses. So you can say, well, I know that I'm on the introvert spectrum, and just because I'm that, I'm not going to be able to communicate with anybody. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is it helps you understand your strengths, but it also helps you understand your weaknesses and how you can improve and be conscientiously communicating with your teammates. So the first one is sanguine. That's me. They are typically in a team setting. They're the creative thinkers. So that's me. I like to come up with a lot of ideas, but I don't typically tend to think about how these ideas will actually work. I don't care about that. I'm just coming up with all kinds of creative ideas. Maybe some work, maybe they don't. I don't care about that at the moment. We'll get to that, but the opposite, melancholic, which you'll see in a little bit, wants to think about all the details before they would come up with an idea. Their emotional needs are there. They need attention, their acceptance as is. They like affection, and they like people to tell them that they're doing a good job. I love being told I'm doing a good job, right? Some people don't need that. I typically do, because if I don't know I'm doing a good job, then I don't know if I'm being able to effectively communicate or do a good job for you all. So sanguines are best at making initial contact. So they're the extroverts, they're the flighty people, they're the ones that are the life of the party, that type of person. But they can be easily distracted and forgetful. Absolutely 100% forgetful. I use a project management system called Asana, and it has literally hundreds of to-do tasks. If it doesn't get in Asana or it's not on my calendar, I'm not going to remember it, because there's so many different ideas that I have on a daily basis that if I don't write them down or if I don't have tasks, I'll get excited about one thing, I'll work on it, and then I'll forget about all these other things, okay? So again, that's one of my weaknesses as a sanguine. My presentation style can be humorous with a light touch. So like if I was in a team for EagleWorks, maybe it may be that you want to identify your sanguines to do predominantly a lot of the talking, or maybe you don't. That's for you all to come up with. But understanding, again, your strengths and weaknesses and understanding what that team dynamic is going to go a long way to help you all figure out how are we actually going to do this, especially when we're on stage pitching to the judges. Be aware about the sanguines that they can come on as overly happy or cute and not always taken seriously. They can be frivolous with money, all right? So I don't think that I come into the frivolous with money part, but understand what we're trying to say here is that sanguines tend to be they just want to go and do and have a lot of fun, and that maybe that's another one of their weaknesses. Maybe they need to be reined in just a little bit, right? So you can pair them on your team. You can actually pair them with an opposite that will kind of rein that person in. So working with a lot of introverts over the course of the year, over the course of the years, I have found out that I can actually change how I communicate to them so that I'm not talking real fast. I'm not coming up with all these different ideas because they want certain things in a set way, right? So we'll go over that here in a minute. Examples, me, Penny from The Big Bang Theory, if y'all watch that, and Joy from Inside Out. Then also, and those sanguines, of course, are extroverts, if I didn't say that. Also on the extrovert side, you have the cholerics. So they are basically risk takers, okay? So they're the ones that in a leadership, in a team setting, they're typically the ones that do well at leadership. One of the weaknesses, though, is they are the ones that typically want to assume a leadership role. So you may find that maybe you're the team leader, it's your idea, but you get a choleric on your team, and they may want to take control, and you may not necessarily want them to take control, right? So again, understanding how each of your teammates not only also communicate, but also act, you can understand, okay, they're not trying to take control of my team intentionally. That's just their natural temperament. So you can work on those things, right? So some of their emotional needs are they need loyalty, they need a sense of control, appreciation, and they have to show accomplishment. So again, they're the natural leaders. They're best at motivating people into action, although sometimes be careful with a choleric person, because if they're motivating a person into action, they may be doing it in a coercive manner and not realizing that they're doing so. So be cognizant of that. Also, they are great at directing and delegating plans to produce productivity. They provide a quick and clear instructions and ensure the group sees the immediate gain. Well, here's the thing. Just because they're on entrepreneurship, just because they're also extroverts, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get along with the sanguines immediately, because the sanguines are the ones that are created to come up with all kinds of ideas. They want order, they want structure, and they want to take control, whereas the sanguine doesn't necessarily want to be taken control of, right? So again, just understanding these things will help you be more cohesive teammates. They can be, some of their weaknesses, they're impulsive, and they can be kind of intimidating, kind of like I said, coercive, and they may or may not realize that they're doing it, okay? Their presentation style is authoritative and convincing. So again, that may also be a person that you want to have as doing your presentation or your pitch, but that is for you all as a team to come up with. What we would like to see is all of you all have some part in the pitch, right? But how you all do that, how you come up with it, if it's just one person, if it's everybody, that's up to you all, okay? Be aware that they can be perceived as overpowering. Again, they may or may not realize that they're doing it, but just understand that that particular temperament does want to take control. That's their natural behavior. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. That's just their personality, right? So examples, Tony Stark, Katniss Everdeen, and Jim Kirk, okay? So those are some classic choleric examples. The next one, so now we're on the introvert side, okay? So these are the phlegmatics, all right? So these are the mediators, right? They're even, chill, want everybody to get along, okay? So their place in their team setting is they are a great supporter, okay? Their emotional needs are they need peace and quiet, they need to have a feeling of worth, lack of stress, and respect, all right? Well, obviously, I think everybody wants that, okay? So again, I will reiterate that these are not pigeonholing, they're not the end-all be-all, it's just the temperament that you particularly tend to fall into. Okay, so they're best at ensuring the group is relaxed and comfortable, because they're the ones, they want everybody to be chill, everybody to get along, right? So if you've got some team conflict between maybe your sanguine and choleric, a phlegmatic can come in and really be that mediator. How many of y'all are in the class? Dr. Susan Wells' class. Susan Wells is a perfect example of a phlegmatic. She's actually a licensed mediator, okay? They can be undisciplined and indecisive because they just want everybody to get along. One of their weaknesses, though, is I want everybody to get along, but you have to sometimes make a choice on are we eating Mexican or are we eating pizza? You got two groups, that want both. They're in the middle of like, who cares? It doesn't matter where we go, right? So don't look at them necessarily to making team decisions. They are going to be the ones that will help you talk things through and come to a decision. Their presentation style is believable. Be aware, though, that they can be overly nonchalant, like, oh, who cares, whatever, right? I'm the mediator. They can also appear unenthusiastic and indifferent, and they may not be the best motivators. Okay. Some examples are Luna Lovegood, Raj from Big Bang, and Jim from The Office. I think Jim is a very, very good example for those of you all that watch The Office. I would say that Prison Mike would probably be the choleric, if y'all are familiar with The Office. So finally, then we get to the melancholic. So this is, again, the introvert. This is the polar opposite of a sanguine person, all right? And I had the benefit of, for about 5 years, actually working with a melancholic person. And sometimes we got along really well. Other times we really clashed, and it all came down to communication, right? Because I wasn't communicating the way that she needed to hear, and vice versa. She would want to write emails that were about that long. I wanted 2-3 sentences overview, okay? That doesn't mean that either of us are wrong. That's just the difference in how we communicate. So their place in team setting is details person. Again, not stereotyping, not generalizing, but typically you're going to find that your accountants are on that side, okay? Their emotional needs, they need sensitivity, they need support when they're down, they need space, and they need silence. So if there's a little bit of conflict on the team or things are getting pretty hot, don't expect them to be very effective at that point in time, all right? They're best at planning and explaining the details, keeping financial records straight, so they're going to be great for your finances, being sensitive to the needs of others, and ensuring the group sees long-range goals. So they're really the ones that are really going to be able to help you plan, see the big picture, see all the details and how the context of everything relates together, all right? Their presentation style is accurate and sincere. They are not light and bubbly and creative, and I wouldn't say not creative, but they're not light and bubbly, and they're, again, the polar opposite of sanguines, okay? Be aware that they can be perceived as overly intellectual and removed, and they may make others feel less intelligent and get lost in the details of a situation. Again, that's not a bad thing, that's just how they are. So again, the better you can understand your teammates, and you've got a melancholic and you're a sanguine or a choleric, understand all of your all's temperaments, and you all will be able to communicate better and be a better team. So examples are Hermione, Temperance Brennan, and Spock. So not overly emotionally people, but they take emotions a lot more seriously than maybe a sanguine or a choleric will. So those are the 4 temperaments. So your action item again tonight, in addition to going out and filling out the registration form, is go and take that test. It's worth 5 minutes of your time. I think you'll be really surprised. Also, when you get through the test, they'll give you even more examples and explanation of each of these. So please encourage each of your teammates to take those and communicate with each other what you all have found. So I guarantee you, knowing this, I've seen this happen many, many times. We always do this every year with EagleWorks. I directed governor's school for 3 years. That's where we bring 30 high school students up and we put them in the teams. They have no idea who they are, and being able for them to understand their temperament makes things a lot better. It's just communication. If you're not communicating, you're not moving forward, right? And it can cause a lot of conflict. So seriously, take that seriously and go and take it. And I think you'll find a lot of interesting things. And I guarantee you, it will make you a better team. So moving along. Sending and receiving information. So again, like I've been saying, knowing you and your team members' temperaments and being able to communicate is only going to make you better. Some tips here are that when you're sending information, so when you're telling somebody something, it's got to be well thought out and when you're giving criticism, don't just criticize somebody to criticize it or because you don't like their idea. If you don't like their idea, think about how you can explain that to them and not being in a confronting or conflicting manner. Therefore, with the sole purpose of bringing them down, you can explain to them, okay, I understand, I see what you're saying. Here's why I don't necessarily agree with that opinion. Let's talk through this, right? So when you're on the recipient end of information, don't get your feelings hurt just because, especially if you got a choleric and you're like melancholic or phlegmatic, maybe they say something and it kind of hurts your feelings. Maybe they didn't do that intentionally, right? So we can be overly passionate. So I know all of you all, obviously, clearly, y'all are passionate about what you're doing because y'all survived a monsoon literally to come here on a 5 o'clock Wednesday night. And I couldn't thank y'all enough for that. So again, the same applies with your team. So y'all can become very passionate about maybe you want to go in this one direction, but maybe another teammate or all of the rest of your teammates don't want to go in that direction. You want to go in a different one. sit down and talk it out and understand these are the different temperaments, and here's the different individual personalities and how to better communicate with them. Everybody has off days, and that can cause your temperament to or weaknesses to flare. Lack of sleep. I know all of us probably should get a lot more sleep. I definitely could, and that can definitely cause some stress at times. And it's important to bring up issues early on before they become grudges or problems. So don't harbor resentment. Don't, maybe you've got I'm sure y'all been here before, you got, I don't know, class project, you got 4 people on your team, and like 1 or 2 of them aren't pulling their weight, but the 2 that are the ones that are talking about it behind their backs. And it's like, well, if they do this or they do that, but they never talk to the other person and say, hey, get your butt in gear. Go ahead and get those communicated out early. I can guarantee you that it will it will severely reduce any conflict on down the road, especially when it comes time that kind of towards the deadline of you're getting all your stuff together. Go ahead and mitigate those issues now, and then it will not nearly be as much of an issue as when you get there. So what I also want to teach you, this is one of my favorite things about effective communication. So this is another great tip. I learned about SBAR. Are any of you all in nursing by any chance, or a pre-healthcare? Okay, so SBAR is all about standardization of communication. Okay, so for the example that you all had when you did the activity, when you lined up, there was no one particular standard way that you all were communicating, because our standard is verbally communicating. You would say, hey, April 20th, 1980, and another person is whatever date they are. Easy, right? That's our standard communication. But even sometimes when we're verbally communicating, that still isn't a good enough standard to communicate what you're actually saying, especially given the context of your temperaments and given the context that a lot of you all have completely different backgrounds. A marketing major and a mechanical engineering major are 2 different diverse types of backgrounds, and therefore will potentially communicate things in different ways, right? So what we try to do is we try to achieve a better standardization of communication, okay? And I can tell you, as soon as I started using SBAR for my communications, it significantly improved the way that I communicate. So not only in my public speaking, because I do a lot of that, but also even in emails. This is not I'll not say that. So in emails, this is a great way for you all to format emails, because a lot of times we can give the background and a lot of information, and then we actually ask the question that we want answered at the very end, right? So sometimes people may not get all of the information that you want to communicate. So SBAR is a format that you can use to be able to standardize that communication, whether it be through talking to people, whether it be through emails, or a myriad of other communication. I'll tell you, I love SBAR. So SBAR bridges communication gaps. So it started out in Navy submarines in World War II. All right, so people that load, the guys that would load the ammunition would also have to work with the captains of the submarines, and those people talk completely differently, right? So the Navy developed this standardization of communication. So not too long ago, the National Institute of Health actually adopted this as the standard. They use SBAR in the emergency room. This is a very real thing, because in their case, lives are literally on the line. A nurse and a doctor, their end goal is to save a patient, right? They don't want them to die, but the communication and the words and the way that they communicate are completely different. So they standardize communication protocol in the emergency room, and they use SBAR. So what in the world is SBAR? It's an acronym that stands for Situation, Background, Assessment, and Recommendation. Okay, so we'll go over each of those individually, but again, this is a format, a protocol that you can use to format your emails, to format your communications with your team members. I guarantee you, if you start using this, it's a little tricky at first because you have to kind of get in the tune of using it and practicing it. But if you can start using this, you will communicate better with your professors. You will communicate better with your teammates. You'll communicate with people that are completely different than you, especially when you've got age gaps. So you're a college-age student, maybe you're communicating with somebody that's significantly older than you, and you talk differently. Use SBAR. So what we do is when you are communicating, you start out with the situation. So immediately, right out the gate, You identify what the problem and or your concern is, and provide a brief description of that, right? So when you're emailing, maybe you're emailing or you're talking to a teammate and they have a difference of idea of how you want to move forward, instead of just go immediately and say, I don't think I agree with that, and here's why. Okay, the situation is that I have a problem with how you're handling our presentation. Okay, or I have an issue with insert anything that you want there. Or this could be positive as well. What I find though is SBAR really works really well when you've got to confront a negative situation. But even in positive situations, and like writing your professor, if you will format it like this and start out with, I have this question, okay? Just right out the gate, I'm writing you because this, okay? When you're communicating with people on your teams that don't know you, especially, identify and then describe your concern. So maybe you are writing an employer because you want them to consider you for a job position, right? Or maybe you want to get an internship. Maybe NASA, maybe you've met somebody from NASA and you want to, and they give you their card. You email them. There's a good chance that they don't remember you. So right out the gate, here's the situation. You don't have to say here's the situation, but tell them, my name is Michael Akins. I met you at the career fair, and I'm really interested in potentially interning for your NASA program or whatever, right? So start out with the situation. Just cut to the chase. What is the question or what is my concern that I want to communicate to you? Okay. Then you can go into some background detail. So with background, it provides clear and relevant detail about the situation and the reason for your communication. So my name is Michael. We met at the career fair. I want to inquire about internships. Then you give a little bit of background about yourself. I'm really qualified because I'm in SEDS Club. I've always had an interest in rocketry, yada, 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 right? So in a practical application for your teams, you have said, hey, I want to talk to you about our presentation style. I don't think that it's the direction we need to go in. That's your opportunity to say, here's the background of why. You really like blue, I understand that, but our brand colors are purple and yellow, right? So here's the background reason why I am communicating this situation to you. So again, it provides a clear and relevant detail about the situation that you're addressing. Then you talk about your assessment, okay? So you give them some background information, and here are the reasons why. You're not just saying, okay, you want to do a blue presentation, but our brand colors are purple and yellow. Tell them why that matters. This is your opportunity to assess the situation. If we were to use a blue presentation, that goes against our branding, and that will confuse the judges. So it's my assessment that if we use our brand colors for our presentation, we will have a better presentation, right? So going with my NASA example is, okay, I met you, right? That's the situation. I want to get an internship. Here's some reasons why, some background info about me. Then my assessment is, I feel like I would be a great intern for you all because of all the things that I've already said, but also in addition that I have all these professional skills, I will fill a gap that you don't have, right? So that's your personal assessment of yourself. But going back to your team example, tell them why. And this is again through verbal communication or email. When you're trying to communicate with them, give them a reason why, not just because why. Well, I like purple and yellow, right? And that's why we need to use it. No, purple and yellow is our brand colors. It will make it more effective. It will make it more cohesive. Do y'all understand where I'm going with that? Okay. And then finally is your recommendation. So the assessment and recommendation kind of blend together a little bit. But once you've kind of given that assessment, give them the recommendation of what we should do. Okay. So I've given you I've assessed the reason why we should use purple and yellow instead of our blue presentation. My recommendation to us is that we reformat our presentation and use our brand colors of purple and yellow, right? So again, it's your ideas for solving the problem, because when you're communicating with somebody, you can get your ideas out there, but if you don't give them some tangible action item or something to go on that, or if you just assume that being, as you said, all of this stuff, that they're going to make a change, don't assume that. Tell them directly, here's what you need to do. Here's what I would like for you to do. So I recommend that we go back and reformat using our brand colors with purple and yellow. With the NASA thing, you could say that here's all the reasons why I would be a good intern at NASA. It would be great if we could have a conversation. Can I send you my resume? Is there a link that I can fill out for more information? Those type of things. So always pair your communication with some particular action item. Do not assume that a person is going to do something just because you've laid out the background in your assessment. Okay. So again, really everything is with communicating. You've got to be clear, you've got to be direct, but you've got to let people know what it is that you want out of that communication. All right, does that make sense? So again, situation, background, assessment, recommendation. It works so well, especially when speaking with teachers. Sometimes, Dr. Painter, I'll just call you out here. If you were able to receive an email, maybe a student has a conflict with, or maybe their grade isn't what they thought it was. Instead of blasting you and saying, "Oh, I studied all this and I should be getting a better grade," wouldn't it be better to hear, "Hey, I'm writing you because I don't agree with the grade. Here's the background and the assessment of the reasons that I feel like I should have a better grade. And my recommendation is, could we talk more about this?" Right? Wouldn't that be a whole lot better than hearing like, "Hey, awful, terrible teacher, I deserve better than this, and you didn't give it to me," right?
Yeah.
So what are some more practical applications? I'll just put you on the spot. What are some more practical applications within the classroom that you can see with an SBAR protocol?
Well, I utilize Teams a lot in my classes, and I do think that a lot of the issues with Teams is communication based, and you do have folks that they will send those type of emails like, basically they'll stop communicating. So they try to like text, have a group text, whatever, we're supposed to meet, and then you didn't show up, so they just drop it. That is not effective. It's not helpful. So having a kind of standard format, I like to use a team contract in those kind of things as well. To put something like, we're going to communicate in this, if we're doing emails, even if it's a group chat, whatever, that we use that format. So that we say exactly what it is that we want, what we think the problem is, what we recommend, and put a time frame to it, because people read things differently, especially if they're reading it and you're not speaking to them face to face.
Right.
That gets all twisted really easily. Being very clear and concise about where you're coming from and what you would like to see happen can cut out a lot of the pain of teamwork.
Unnecessary pain.
Unnecessary pain.
Because teamwork can be a great thing.
Yeah.
And I would say, this is not an empirical number, but I would say 90% of most problems are caused by ineffective communication.
I agree.
Whether, especially in email, you typically are not going to have emojis and things like that in there. So you may,
Please don't.
yes, please don't. You may incorrectly infer what a person means, or they may overtly, put everything in shouty words and all caps and all that. So that's not fun either. But be conscientious of how the person that you're going to communicate with, how they can potentially receive it. Understand their temperaments is going to help you go a long way in how you actually format and communicate with them. So please go and take that test. It'll take you not long at all. Have your teammates do that too. And with that, we'll end the effective presentation. Okay, so hopefully y'all learned a little bit from this. We will put that PowerPoint up and the video up for you tomorrow, Eggstone. And then final comments: effective communication is vital to your success in EagleWorks and teamwork. And when you go out and be a professional, it does take practice and it does take commitment, especially in times during stress. The more you practice, the easier it becomes, everything. Okay. So with that said, I want to make sure that I point out that next Wednesday we will not be in here. We'll be in the multi-purpose room in Roden University Center, and we're going to do the design challenge. But this is actually a workshop where you can actually win a $1,000 scholarship. So we're going to take you through the design thinking methodology. Y'all are going to either come with a problem or your EagleWorks idea and go through design thinking with it, or you can do something completely different. This is completely up to you. But we will give you about 2 hours to actually go through that. You're going to pitch to some judges. One of your all's teams will actually win a $1,000 scholarship. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to learn about design thinking. So Again, next Wednesday, 5 o'clock, not in the makerspace at Rhoden University, multi-bursary. Tell your friends about this, even if they're not doing EagleWorks, they can still come as well, because we want to tell everyone about design thinking, because it's a really, really great and effective method of figuring out what it is that you're actually, how to solve the problem that you're trying to solve, okay? So with that said, we can end the presentation. So